I've written a letter to Daddy. His address is heaven above.
Greetings from Castle Gory, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Just managed to dodge a kiss from Aurora. Oh dear, oh dear. Well, without further ado, I'm going to plunge right in because we have a lot of ground to cover today. So, Jenny Chilton says, Lady C, what do you make of the news coming out about the Invictus top executives suddenly losing their jobs and stories that Invictus is heavily in debt? Have they finally woken up to the fact that Harry and his handler do nothing to enhance the Invictus image? Or is there something more nuanced going on? Interesting question. You know, Harry and Meghan are in big trouble. They're in big trouble financially, they're in big trouble professionally, they're in big trouble reputationally. They have dug themselves into a variety of holes, none of which they can get out of, and each of which is connected to the other. So there is a rat run of holes that they've dug themselves into. And in the course of this video, I am going to point out to you how there is actually a thread running through much of what has been happening recently. And it's pretty desperate where they are concerned, pretty desperate. To answer this particular question, it's a brewing scandal. I need to be careful what I say for legal reasons, but there has been trouble at Invictus. People who were running it very effectively and efficiently have been, according to what I have been told, thwarted in their intentions and desires to steer the Invictus games in a particular direction. Because we have had Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up, especially now that I look so fantastic since I've lost so much weight. You know, I'm suffering from Ozempicrexia. Yes, but I'm not really suffering. But everybody needs to think I'm suffering. I suppose. Am I adult? Well, what's the massive expenses, evidently, the massive amount of money that has been frittered away and diverted from the main purpose, and the massive amount of attention that has been diverted away from the veterans onto a particular couple, all of that has raised serious questions in the way Invictus has been run and has been allowed to run, and who has colluded and who has actually objected. You know, I could be wrong, and I say this for legal reasons, but my understanding is that Meghan and Harry do not give their time, that their every expense is absorbed by the charity. I know Harry and Meghan's definition of charity is not the same as mine, and I know that they are absolutely right to follow that adage that Charity starts at home, especially when you've got 16 bathrooms and you're so full of it that no matter how often you use them, you can't get rid of it. Oh, God, call a plumber. Yet another toilet is blocked up. I don't know why these toilets keep on getting blocked up. Surely they should be used to avalanches of BS by now. Well, everything evidently, and this I say for legal reasons, could be, shall we say, not absolutely accurate. And I could have been misled in my information. And I say this all for legal reasons, because I actually don't believe I have been misled with the information I have been given. And this is the information I was given. Every item of clothing, every expense, down to the simplest bottle top, every hotel bill, every bit of transportation, every bit of travel, everything attached to their tremendous retinue. Because remember, you're dealing with royalty, and the only way that everyone is going to know we're royal is that we have a whole load of staff. Well, there has been evidently dissatisfaction in the way things have been going, and I am not prepared at this point to say whether the two people in question jumped or were pushed, because if I give that information away, it could lead straight back to the people to whom I have spoken about this. And I'm not prepared to drop anybody in what Harry and Meghan expel so regularly in those 16 bathrooms, and all the plethora and excess is then shot out at us, the general public, and the not so gullible and the gullible world at large. It's a vast amount of money. Now, there is funding to the tune of $15 million from the Canadian authorities, and $15 million donation evidently from, shall we say, a very rich sponsor. Of course, not Archewell, no. Well, we're a charity registered in Delaware. We need to keep a nice float in Delaware, so we can't be spending that money. And also, we're royalty, and we're supposed to have all our expenses paid. I was told, and I'm going to read out what I was told, that a lot of the puff pieces that have been appearing recently have been appearing as a deliberate device to distract from the brewing scandal, and quote unquote, Invictus is supposed to be a charity, not a gravy train or a platform for narcissists. I think at this point I should refrain from saying anything more. Louise Jackson says, but before actually going on to what Louise Jackson says, let me make the point. this is not necessarily the last you're going to be hearing about this. You know, gravy has a terrible way of staining when it splatters. And gravy trains that get derailed, all that gravy, oh goodness, talk about making a mess. Louise Jackson says, Dear Lady C, is there any truth to the King giving Harry an ultimatum to stop with the negatives he and his wife keep spewing? Thank you for your very informative input and your funny antics. It sure brightens my day. Thank you, Louise Jackson. Well, you know, in life we should be joyous if we can be. And there is joy to be found in the strangest places. And I have to say, life has taught me, take your joyousness where you find it, and sometimes add levity to what would otherwise be a totally distressing situation, and you get through it rather more readily than if you are too morose. After all, life is about being as joyous as you can be. And nobody said that life wasn't trying. So even in the most trying of circumstances, if one can find a bit of levity to lighten the load, let's do it. That's my take on things. Well, the King has not had to give Harry an ultimatum. Harry knows the way the King feels, what the King thinks. Harry is his son. I know from people who know the King pretty well that he has been disconsolate about the derailing of his relationship with Harry and Harry's relationship with the royal family and the institution of the monarchy. He doesn't need to keep on reminding Harry. And there is no prospect of him ringing up Harry to remind him to shut his trap. Because aside from anything else, Charles isn't stupid, and he knows anything he says is liable to turn up in Scabies' book, or Gayle King's show, or, well, People magazine, Vanity Fair, but especially People magazine. Harry knows that his father cannot abide the venom that spews forth from him and the totally filthy display of washing dirty linen in public, which, it has to be said, no gentleman ever initiates. No gentleman ever initiates washing dirty linen in public. And I speak as the ex-wife and the daughter-in-law and the sister-in-law of 3 arch dirty linen washers in public. And my sister-in-law, Jeanie, said to me, Lady Jean Campbell, who'd been married to Norman Mailer, Jeanie said to me, at the height of all of the displays that Colin and Ian were subjecting the world to, she said, it's just as well that Colin isn't a member of White's, otherwise they would have booted him out the way they had to boot Pa out. It's just disgusting. Gentlemen don't wash their dirty linen in public. Aside from anything else, when they do it, it then forces everybody else to be splattered with the filthy water gentlemen try to go about things cleanly and decently and decorously. Salsa Shakers says, Lady C, did you read the interview Tyler Perry had in People magazine? He was gushing that he is Lilibet's godfather and how gorgeous she is, yada, yada, yada. Well, I think I did read it because I had to read it to answer this question. I feel really sorry for Tyler Perry. I know people who know Tyler Perry and they actually say he's a nice man. Gullible, but nice, of course. Very bright as well. Always manages to spin everything into a bigger buck. So he's a very astute businessman. And also, he is one of those people who believes in promoting those who share his own race, if only in part. So I read it and I thought, poor deluded Tyler Perry, setting himself up to be exploited and being grateful that he is being exploited. But then I thought, well, he's getting something out of it. He has an agenda. First of all, he got in touch with Meghan before the marriage, not via Oprah, he says, but via an agent that they had once had in common. Obviously, and I've said this before and I'm going to say it again, in the hope that he would be asked to the wedding, and wasn't. He wasn't significant or important enough to be asked until Meghan needed his chattels, his filthy lucre, his plane, his house. And she reached out to him. Sorry, and according to him, he treated her like a therapist. Well, people dump on their therapists. That's what therapists are there for, so that people will dump on them instead of dumping on their loved ones or people who are friendly with them, who will then say, enough is enough, and leaving. A therapist is being paid to be dumped on. Not actually that somebody who seeks health, I should say, would actually purposely set out to exploit the therapist's position by unconscionably dumping. But certainly in the early days of therapy, you have to dump on your therapist. That's what relieving your burden is all about. Tyler Perry doesn't realize it. He has already admitted that Meghan has used him and he has allowed himself to be used. Doubtless because of her little bit of African blood. But so he's getting something out of it. And he's got to be godfather of little Lily, as he calls her, sweet. And he says they're beautiful children, and that he did say that Harry and Meghan make beautiful babies. Let's resile over that one. Let's put it that way. Oh dear, oh dear. But, you know, the children aren't to blame for having been brought into this world. They're not to blame for anything. And suffer the little children to come unto me, said Jesus Christ. And we should be delighted if little Lily has a godfather who is captivated by her. And doubtless he will leave little Lily some money and maybe even sweet Archie as well. Meghan's chosen well. Kim Kovaburius says, Harry and Meghan pretended they called the king to divert attention from the book they wrote using Scooby's name. Sorry, you mean Scabies' name. Sorry. You've spelt it incorrectly. It's Scabies' name. Well, let me put it this way. I don't believe that the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. I'm not a member of the Flat Earth Society. I'm not gullible. And I know enough about the workings of the various publications to be able to tell you that the BBC leaked the story, and then it was followed up by Victoria Ward. Now, I'm going to let you into a little secret about how the Telegraph royal correspondents work. You have Camilla Tominey on the one hand, who is impartial and who speaks the truth, and you have Victoria Ward, who bends over backwards to be pro Harry and Meghan. She wrote the story. Now, I'm going to tell you how things work when journalists ring up the palace for private information. They're usually told, I'm afraid that's private. We can't comment on it. Need I say more? I don't think so. Roma Green says, for some reason, I don't believe they called King Charles. I think it's their lies and they know he won't make a comment about it. That's why they said it. Well, the king wouldn't be making a comment because the king doesn't receive calls from journalists. The press office, or whatever it calls itself now, I think it's called communication, something, anyway. Whatever it calls itself nowadays. I'm calling it the press office. That's what it used to be called. They don't make comments on personal activities of this nature. So, I'm trying to find a delicate way of putting it. They knew that the king would not rumble them. They knew that the palace wouldn't rumble them. So they can say anything they want. And I'll tell you the way the royal correspondents by and large work. Not all of them. I have respect for some of them. I certainly have respect for Robert Jobson, Camilla Tominey, except there are one or two others I have respect for. But the way the average, let's put it this way, royal correspondent works is they go to other royal correspondents and it's the rats running around in a circle, trying to find a bit of cheese and an exit. Now, Harry and Meghan knew they were safe. And remember, this story was planted to distract from the brewing Invictus scandal and amidst Scabies' book, which they will have known, not the royal correspondents, they being Harry and Meghan, well, certainly Meghan will have known that people was getting ready to do something because, it's really suspicious. Evidently, Scabies has discovered that the best place to get his skin scratched is California, especially when he's writing a book. I wonder why he had to write it there and not here. Oh dear, oh dear. Why do you think? I know what I think. Paula Lysus says, King Charles was far too smiley and relaxed to have had an "you owe my wife an apology" phone call. I think Harry is going to realize before too long that this book is going to have a worse outcome for him than all the other nonsense and lies he's put out. Love to the furry girls. Just a thought, if the king doesn't have a mobile phone, I wonder who Harry and his wife were talking to. I'm just kidding, in brackets. Well, maybe they were talking to Victoria Ward. That's a joke, by the way. I'm kidding too. I mean, none of this can you make up. When you know the mechanics of how things work. But it suits the king and it suits the palace to leave the question undecided and unanswered. And I'm going to tell you why. And this is one of the brilliant side effects of never explain and never complain, and don't provide information. Don't be forthcoming with it. Allow people to speculate. Allow people to believe that black is white and pink is green. The virtue of doing that, and the virtue of it in this situation, is that Harry and Meghan, to be convincing about having phoned Pa to wish him, and let's remember, Archie and Lily sang "Happy Birthday" to. Now, what's a grandpa? Pa? What's a grandpa? What's a grandpa? Daddy? Mom? What's a grandpa? Don't be ridiculous. A grandpa is something to loathe. Everybody knows that. And if you don't believe it, look at my letter to Daddy. I wrote a letter to Daddy. Yo! Daddies are things to despise. And grandpas are your parents' daddies. So that's what a grandpa is. Oh. Shall we throw darts at it? I mean, all of this is just so crazy. It's beyond belief. But the palace is very adept at taking advantage of situations. And in this situation, they have been handed by Harry and Meghan a dagger with which to, shall we say, render Scabies' work doubtful, because Harry and Meghan have indicated that Scabies has no input from them. Of course, we all know that's rubbish, because the contents of the book that have already discharged, really, is the best way of putting it. It's very apparent that Harry and Meghan are the sources, because either Scabies is lying through his back teeth and manufacturing and fabricating information, which would be the height of unethical conduct. And I'm not for a second accusing him of unethical conduct. Or he has been fed this information and has faithfully recorded it. It's in the palace's interest that Harry and Meghan cast doubt on Scabies' book. Do you begin to see the wheels within wheels? It's life is really very interesting when you understand. It's rather like making lasagna. One layer of pasta, one layer of mince, one layer of cheese, one layer of this. And as you go down, 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 there are layers within, and then more layers and more layers. It's very fascinating. Maureen Berardine says, in my opinion, I do not think that the new book by Scooby-Doo and the Trickster will do their reputations any favours. Oh, I am sure the king will be quivering with anticipation for another opportunity to talk to his wayward son concerning part 2 of the lies and disparaging remarks again about the royal family, the death of the Queen, and the belittling of Prince William, and whatever else Scabies has included in his tell-all. I do not think there will be any kiss and make-up anytime soon. No, there will be no kiss and make-up anytime soon. I have been saying for some time now, and everybody's starting to fall into line and agree with me, that the relationship between William and his brother is finito, and that Charles is not the pushover that the public seems to have thought that he was. As far as Meghan and Harry and Scabies are concerned, they know that the Sussex squad and their avid supporters will believe any rubbish that is promulgated by the chief propagandist amid Scabies, as long as Harry and Meghan are victims. And Harry has certainly shown that he and Meghan were the victims of the Queen's death. She, of course, was purely incidental in the whole thing. They became the absolute stars of the show and the victims. But to everybody else, it's become increasingly apparent that Harry, Meghan, and Scabies should be thrown out with the dirty water. Toby One Dino says, oh, and of course there is no kiss and makeup coming anytime soon. Of course, should Harry and the King make up, my experience, now I'm going to speak from experience, I'm not going to speak because I'm careful not to put words in the King's mouth, partly out of respect for the fact that he's my king, and partly out of respect for the people who have told me things. And But I don't need to put words in his mouth. I can put words in my mouth. Let me tell you something. Once you've been betrayed by someone, you never trust that person again, wholeheartedly. And there is no kiss and makeup coming soon. And even if, capital letters, if, Victoria Ward's tremendously confident statement that there would be a follow-up call next week, that was going to aid the rapprochement that had already begun. Take out the violins and let's play. Ha ha. Screechy, screechy. Even if that had been so then, after what's happened in the last few days, there's no prospect of it happening now. So, to go on, Toby One Dino says, don't forget the balloon report from Palace staff when Harry and Meghan were working royals. The king knows how bad it was. Do you think he can risk a repeat from Hank and Skank? Not a chance. No, actually, I'm going to say something that's going to be rather unpopular. William would not want to give Harry and Meghan a chance to repeat the abuse that their staff alleged that they were subjected to. But Charles, being Harry's father, would hope that would give Harry and Meghan a chance. And the parents of disturbed children really ultimately have a choice. Draw very firm lines or let go and let God. And usually what those parents do is interchange between the two postures. Drawing a firm line, giving latitude, re-establishing the firm line. We need to cut the king some slack. It's his son. He loves him. I'm not even saying that I would do anything differently, because I'm not sure I would. If you love your child, yeah, you want better, and you set up the situation, hopefully, for bad behavior to be brought to a close, and you do everything in your power to encourage good behavior. But when you're dealing with disordered people, especially people who are alcoholics or on drugs, or both, you have to cut them an awful lot of slack. And I'm afraid that very often people take the side of their children over their staff. I'm just saying that for what it's worth. Shakti says, Dear Lady C, apparently there has been a photo recently uploaded to Instagram that has caused a bit of an uproar. I don't know if you have seen it, but it is extremely unflattering if you have seen it. Can you comment as to whether or not this is what is referred to as Ozempic face, or if it's just that no filters were used? Thank you in advance for your reply. Yes, I've seen the photograph. Meghan plunging in, breaking ranks while somebody is giving a speech. Harry's looking down sheepishly and embarrassedly. The blonde woman on his right, if you're looking at him, is looking straight ahead. Meghan has bolted into the audience. Oh my God, Mr. DeMille, there's a camera. There are people. Oh, my lust for attention has no bounds, Mr. DeMille. I've gotta interact with the people. Everybody, I love you and you love me. I'm so desperate for attention. I can't even wait for that dog to finish his goddamn speech. Well, she looks desperate, and she is desperate. My understanding is that they are in a pretty rotten place. And yes, it is my considered opinion that it is Ozempic face. She has lost an awful lot of weight. Is she channeling? Am I going to channel Diana again? Am I going to channel Diana? She had an eating disorder. Sorry, am I going to channel Grandma Diana? I got to remember the relationship. She had an eating disorder. I need to have an eating disorder. Otherwise, people aren't going to realize that I am. And also, I need to lose weight. I need to look fabulous. You know, as the Duchess of Windsor said, a woman can't be too rich or too thin. Well, in fact, I've always said the Duchess of Windsor was absolutely wrong. A woman can be too rich and too thin. I speak from experience on the latter, not the former, but I have seen so many very rich women whose lives were a total mess as a result of their money. But Meghan broke ranks in the most distasteful and tasteless and vulgar and, as Nicky Haslam would say, common manner. She's so animated. I've got to tell you, I'm so animated, you know, and I've got to flick my hands all about the place and show my chipped nails. Well, there is a school of thought that Meghan is using her appearance to, on the one hand, push her fashionista image, and on the other hand, because narcissistic people with antisocial personalities, they don't only seek and demand attention, they seek and demand sympathy as well. And that she is using her appearance to gain sympathy as well as attention. But there is no doubt in anybody's mind that her loss of weight is, shall we say, self-induced. Let's leave it at that. And I'm not referring to the way Diana used to induce her loss of weight. Christine Wyatt says, now that we've got Cameron back, we have a Remainers cabinet. We need to leave the ECHR so that we can stop this mass illegal immigration. This is not going to happen with this government. We will be tied to Brussels, which is what they want. They have reneged on their promises to the voters of 2019, some of which were Labour voters who loaned them their vote to get Brexit done. Sadly, we never did get Brexit done, and I'm not sure we're going to achieve a result irrespective of whether the Tory party or the Labour party is in power. I don't think Labour has any desire for Brexit either. I think it is a shocking disgrace that so many of our politicians have subverted and perverted the democratic process to sabotage the electorate's desire for Brexit, and have done their utmost to make it as much a failure as they possibly could, instead of having made it a success. You know, in life, if you have character, if you have integrity, if you have decency, and if you have a position that you have responsibilities that you have to live up to, there are times when you have to do things that you would prefer not to do, that you may not even be in agreement with, but it is your duty to do them. I have always said to my children from they were young, if you've got to do it, don't moan about it. Try to make it as pleasant as possible by being as cooperative as possible. We have been failed by our politicians. They are an absolute disgrace. They are a total disgrace. More than that, I need not say. I think I've made my position very clear. And incidentally, it doesn't matter whether I was personally pro-Brexit or pro-Remain. Once the electorate speaks, the government is obliged to fulfill its demands. There is no excuse. It has no justification whatsoever for undermining the democratic process and saying they know better. No, you don't. You are elected to fulfill the will of the people. Maria Petherbridge says, actually, the Chinese government loves helping African people and their countries until the people can manage, in quotes, and helping was in big block capitals, until the people can manage, and then the free, in quotes, service ends and they have to pay for, quotes, services rendered. It is happening here in South Africa. It's happening all over the world. It happened in Jamaica. The Chinese have a desire to buy influence via their financial prosperity. This is their form of worldwide imperialistic overtones. They don't attack, they don't bomb, they help, they induce, they use their money, they get you on side, and then you are obligated. The mafia, the Cosa Nostra, have traditionally done the same thing. I'll do a favor for you. One of these days, you're going to have to pay me back. Oh, I think it's time that I don't like your greatest love. You need to oblige me. I was so kind to you. There are overtones of that, I'm afraid. And I'm going to answer the rest of the question because so many of you have wonderful questions and input that if I can quote you, it's much better than me saying it because I agree with it and you've gone to the trouble of writing it. And why should I always be saying it? So I'm gonna let Zena Slarosa speak. The Chinese are not generous. They build infrastructure of economically struggling nations with very high, almost unconscionable interest rates. And when they are not able to pay back the projects, these would be forfeited in favor of China. I say that China is very enterprising in a corrupt and devious way. My first disagreement with you, Lady C, but I still love you and always look forward to your videos. My dear, you obviously misunderstood what I was saying, but that's fine. You misunderstood what I was saying the last time I said it. I didn't say it so strongly as I've just said it. But I've read it out because I agree with you. I have seen it with my own two eyes, what they have been doing in the West Indies, in Africa. They're all over the place, buying up influence. I have always said the great flaw in that technique is sovereign states have the right to repudiate debts. But if China buys up enough of the world, nobody is going to exact revenge on the Chinese for having maneuvered them into invidious and extortionate situations, pretending that it was all altruistic, when it turned out it was nothing but obligationalism. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. Please keep the questions and comments coming in so we can speak about what you would like us to be speaking about. Okay, thank you so much. God bless. And if you have truly enjoyed this, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and take good care.